can we please bring in Jim Barker? And, Coach, I don't know really where to start other than Wally really got him talking, if you saw, by saying that the first thing he would do if he was commissioner for the day in the CFL is expand to the U.S. Started a hell of a fight. Didn't expect that to happen. What do you think when you hear that?
You know what? I've heard it so much. When I first came in the league, it was right after the failed experiment. I'm from the U.S. I understand the culture down there. Again, we talked about it a little last week with the way I think you kind of maybe break in is you take it to, a city like Detroit where you got Windsor right there and you share the franchise and you allow them to maybe play some games in the U.S., although the workman's comp and a lot of the issues that go on when you do that might be cost restrictive for the CFL. But again, I just think it's, your last guest, he was bang on. Everything's great through the summer, but then as soon as the end of August comes and college football starts playing, those cities that they chose, they're strong college football areas, and in Birmingham down there, and Birmingham was drawing well, and I watched the Riders. I had been a guest coach with the Riders in '94, and was down living in Vegas and went to that game, and it was a game in, I believe it was July, maybe early August, and it was, all I remember was 120 degrees. And you couldn't even sit. It was at 8:00 at night and hotter than heck. And it was like, wow, how can these guys play in this? I don't see it as a long-term answer. But again, Wally's been in this a long time, and he's certainly entitled to what he thinks is the best move. I do like expanding the CFL and getting to 10 teams at least. I think that would be a great move. But in terms of, are we going to sell teams to the South? Again, we're a different game. And if we can sell the 3-down concept, I don't think we're in competition with the USFL and those teams. So, no. I don't see where it's a thing that's viable, at least in my lifetime.
Yeah, maybe you missed off the top of the show. It's timely because I was on a Florida hockey show last night, and the guy said to me, "Hey, Rob, there's no other football going on down here. We're watching this CFL on CBS Sports Network. Kind of like it. What's it all about?" And I'm like, "Boys, we don't have time." But then the Wally thing comes out, and I'm like, interesting. There is a void there right now anyways. But anyways, moving on. We have not spent enough time on this Edmonton-Ottawa matchup, which is totally fine. Our two biggest regions for viewership are Winnipeg and Sask. But you're out there in the East. How much does the firing of Chris Jones affect tonight's game, do you think, from an Edmonton perspective at Ottawa?
I think most of the time, this is the first time, one thing I want to say, this is the first time in Chris Jones' career, and he's been in since 2002. We were together in Montreal. The first time he's ever been fired. He's always been a step ahead of the posse, and, good on him for that. So I think this hit him hard. I don't see where this gives them a big boost. I think it actually hurts them. They're on a short week. They're going to have to make changes because now Jarius comes down to the sidelines. He now takes on a different role in terms of managing the game. And is he going to be the play caller? Is he going to turn that over to Marcus Howell? I think there's just a lot of things that change. Now, they have an experienced quarterback in McLeod Bethel-Thompson who can maybe take on some play calling and things. But I don't think this move gives them the kind of bump a normal, you talked about the last firing when they fired Kent Austin and June Jones became the head coach. There was a notable, it was almost like Kent had been there and lived his time had come, and there was almost in the locker room, you just sensed from the outside, and I wasn't there, but you sensed from the outside there was like a jubilation. I never got that feeling from anybody in Edmonton. I don't think Jones had lost the locker room. I don't think players there hated him. Do I think he did a lot of things wrong, being the GM? And I do. We've talked about a lot of them on this show, in that it's hard to be the guy trying to get him to play, hard for the guy next to him, and hard for the organization when you got 5 guys lined up in the waiting room ready to come out and take their jobs, and that's kind of Chris's view on the game, on personnel in the game, is always, I can find a better player. And that's tough to sell your team when you're a coach on, any kind of loyalty to the club. I think that was a problem for him. But I don't think there was a huge jubilation over him getting fired. I just don't feel the same kind of thing as like what happened with Kent Austin. So I don't see it being a huge factor. I think it's actually going to be a hindrance for them. I think it's gonna bring them back a step. I think Ottawa last week, the emergence of Khalil Pimpleton is huge for that club because he went in. Braylon Addison had a sore hamstring or something, but it's almost like a Lou Gehrig thing. It's like, he goes out and Khalil Pimpleton comes in and he gives them something they don't have. He gives them that dynamic play. They have Devontae Dedmon for special teams, but he's never been an offensive threat. Pimpleton is a true offensive threat. I mean, he's one of the better wide receiver, the little wide receiver returner guys I've seen in this league in a long time. I would put him, he hasn't done the stuff Lucky Whitehead has done, but he's that type of a player who can really bring some dynamics to that Ottawa organization that needs it badly. They're getting a couple guys back in their secondary. I think this is originally I thought Edmonton would at least win one of these 2 games, but when they lost the game the other night, I just don't feel the firing of Chris Jones is going to be enough to get them over the top. And I think the changes that have to be made now in terms of management, game management, offensive management, it's a lot to overcome.
From the viewers, Nelson in Regina says, new coach energy, Elks get the W. From Bomber Boy says, yep, new coach bump. Drew Brown won't throw for almost 500 yards again. We'll see. That's why we'll all be tuned in. It's fun. Toronto and Hamilton, always a sexy matchup. The Argos are favored by 3.5. I'm taking the Ticats just because nobody else is. What's your read on that game at Tim Hortons Field?
It's just so hard for me ever since I've been in this league. The Hamilton Tiger Cats have been a defensive juggernaut. I mean, Don Sutherland, they're just a nasty defensive team. And they were bad on offense a lot. But it hasn't been since Danny McManus they've played decent offense. Well, they're playing decent offense now. I think Bo Levi's, the guy's thrown 11 touchdown passes. He's certainly not the reason things aren't going well there. Their receiving core is below average, and their defense has just been. And it's hard for me to fathom that. It really is. And I know Orlando Steinauer. He was one of the best defensive coordinators I'd ever been. I watched him develop into it and made him one back in his 3rd year in the league. He was that bright, and it's shocking to me that they're playing the way they are. With that being said, from a physical standpoint, I just don't know that their defensive front has a chance to keep up with what Toronto's offensive line can do. And Kadeem Carey is carrying this team through their whole change of quarterback, kind of like what Saskatchewan needs Shea Patterson to do with AJ Ouellette. So having a great running back along with an offensive line that's extremely physical, and that's the difference between Saskatchewan and Toronto, where losing Hardrick hurts their physical nature. I think that Winnipeg came back to being the bullies last week. They really did play physical in Calgary, and Calgary played physical too. Don't get me wrong. I thought Calgary played great and deserved better fate, but that's been their story, very similar to Edmonton. The whole Alberta province is like, man, they're playing good. They deserve to have more wins than both teams have. So it's just a really interesting week in the CFL. All the games have an intrigue to them that are, like you said, in that Hamilton-Toronto game. Hamilton's coming off a bye. It's just, we're getting into this is week 6, and we still got 2 teams that haven't won a game. That's unheard of.
It is literally unheard of. And by the way, I've got so many fans write me across the country, and they say they can't wait for Fridays. They love football Fridays on this show. And another thing in the game notes was that last week's average points per game, 65 points per game, was the highest in the league since 2017. So there's some very exciting things going on in the CFL, but I got to ask you about the Wally Bowl Sunday. They're going to honor Wally, Lions and Stampeders. Dave Patrician thinks that's going to emotionally boost up the Stamps. Well, maybe they'll do the same for BC. Lions favored by 4.5. What's your read on that game?
Well, when it comes down to that game, you have Jake Mayer and you have VA, Vernon Adams, and Vernon Adams is on a different playing level than everybody else in the league right now. And I sure wouldn't want to bet against him. I just think that the things he's doing are remarkable. And he's this McInnes, and I don't know how bad his injury was, but that game he had over 235 yards. And, he's come on and become that guy that VA always knows I can go to. And he's going to get open. Then they have the big play guys. I mean, Hollins is still dropping too many balls. And I mean, VA would have had over 500 yards if Hollins just catches the ball. It was right there for a 55-yard touchdown. He'd have thrown for 520 yards. I mean, it's asinine what he's doing. And I just think that it's too much for Calgary. Calgary's going to have to hold on to the ball. I love what they're doing on offense in terms of trying to keep Jake Mayer upright. And they had a young kid, Eric Smith, step in at left tackle. I thought he played outstanding. So Calgary keeps bringing these offensive linemen in. Pat Delmonico, great offensive line coach, keeps turning them into really good players. So it's going to be an interesting game. And I'd love to see Calgary at home draw a huge crowd and then play well enough that crowd wants to come back and cheer this team. But
he's a freak right now. They had a good crowd the last home game, so I hope there's a lot there on Sunday at McMahon. But we got a couple minutes. I got to ask you this. Just Riders, Bombers, I never did ask you. It's a, 4-point Bomber line. I know you guys, football guys, don't care about that, but I follow it. And Shea Patterson is the starter. Is that why you think Bombers are favored, that it's Zach versus a backup, or what's your read on the game?
There's no doubt. There's no doubt that's the reason. And, I think that Saskatchewan, a big part of Shea Patterson being able to be successful is their offensive line has got to be solid. And again, Trevor Reed he's playing solid at left tackle, but he's not a physical, that's not his game. His game is he's more of a finesse guy. Hardrick was the guy who was bringing that nasty AJ Ouellette attitude. And that loss is way bigger than anybody can know. It's, that they're going to have a rookie starting in there this week. And I just think that's going to be a lot to overcome for them. Their receiving core is making plays when they need to. Shea Patterson is playing with he just reminds me so much of Cameron Dukes in Toronto. They're very similar in terms of they can both run. They're both neither great passers, but they're okay passers, and they don't make mistakes. And that's what Saskatchewan has to do. They have to not make mistakes in this game, because I do believe Winnipeg, they gave the ball to Oliveira last week again, and he answered the call, and they are becoming the bullies again. That's what their whole mantra is. We've got to get back to being what we are, which is we're going to beat you up. And they need to, because the Ontario Wilson finally stepped up as that Lawler receiver they lost. And he could turn into a real good player. The other guy, Josh Johnson, hasn't had his game yet. He's more of a bigger, 6'2" route runner, where Ontario Wilson is a speedster. So I think that helps them. That will help to keep things spread apart to allow Oliveira to continue to roll. Saskatchewan's defense, I can't say enough about what Corey Mace has done there. I think their linebacking core is as good as anybody in the league. The CJ Rivas is playing outstanding. I'm not huge on Lacombo at free safety, but he's getting better every week. He's a corner trying to convert into playing free safety. and it's just a much more physical position. And I think that's part of what he's got to become, a more physical player to be what they need there. But their secondary, with Milligan and Williams, and they're just, and I think Marcus Sales is starting to fit in there. And then their defensive front. I mean, Micah Johnson just seems like he's playing at a really high level, and between he and Lanier, and they get Malik Carney back this week and Miles Brown back this week. That's a formidable front. It really is. And the question is, can their offense keep the ball away from them long enough so that they can control the game physically? This is the Winnipeg Saskatchewan matchup should be an absolute physical, in your face, like we call a slobber knocker, where there's spit flying everywhere because guys are hitting, and that's what it should be this week. And with a huge crowd expected in Saskatchewan, it very well could be. It's one of the games I'm really looking forward to this week, because I just think this can be for Saskatchewan to win this one at home could really be I think a monumental win in their season and their race to get to where Corey wants them to and where that fan base expects them to be.
Yeah. It was the runaway favorite. We have a poll. What's Canada's game of the week? 75% of respondents said that this one, Bombers, Riders. But on that D, I'm with you, but they got exposed a bit last week in BC. As you know, sometimes it's just a blip, so we'll see who they are. But they got a big test tonight. Jim, we'll be watching. Thanks for the time, man. Always great.
Very good. Thanks, Rod.
The CFL on TSN's Jim Barker.